Hello and welcome to State of the Economy. Today we have somebody in our studios to discuss South Asia. Now, why are we discussing South Asia? This is because in the midst of gloom around the world in regard to economic growth, South Asia is seen by many economists and experts as a sweet spot. South Asia is growing at 6% plus in the midst of near recession in the bulk of the emerging economies. The West, of course, is still reeling from varying degrees of stagnation. So why is South Asia behaving differently? And where does this big growth potential for South Asia come? To discuss that and more, we have with us Mr. Martin Rama, who's Chief Economist in the World Bank for South Asia and understands South Asia very well, has analyzed, studied South Asia. So therefore, we thought we'll have Martin Rama in our office to tell us what is going on in South Asia that makes it makes it a sweet spot, makes it a big potential growth story in the next 5 to 10 years in the midst of general gloom in other parts of the world. Welcome to our show,
Thank you. Good afternoon.
So we thought that we'll have you and to explain to our audiences as to what do you see happening in South Asia, say over the next 5 years, in today's context, in the context of growth generally decelerating around the rest of the world, or if picking up, not showing enough signs of a robust pickup, and in the midst of all this, South Asia is doing well. So what's going on here?
Well, I think it's a very good question, but I would like to unpack the answer into two different things.
Sure.
One is the deep trends, and another is the current turbulent world. And I would like to put them in separate buckets because the deep trends will remain there no matter what. And I would say there are several things in terms of deep trends that are playing in the favor of South Asia now, as they did for East Asia a couple of decades ago.
Some people are talking about South Asian tigers possibly emerging in the next 5-10 years.
I would say that's the right question, is whether South Asia will manage to do as well as East Asia did. I don't think the question is whether South Asia will manage to do well. I'm relatively confident that it will. The question is whether as well.
Yeah, okay.
And so the deep things that are going for South Asia at this point, first is the demographic transition. Okay. I know it's a double-edged sword, but basically you are going from families, let me simplify it, you are going from families with 4 kids to families with 2 kids. So it means that even if the productivity of those who work does not change, you have more per capita. So when you divide that at home, when you are paying the same bills, you are eating from the same kitchen. So even if nothing else changes, that gives you a big push. Also, the age composition is good in terms of savings. When you have a population around their 30s, these are people who are saving for the future. You have an aging population, people are de-saving. It's not the case. So when you look at saving rates in South Asia, they are good, and savings in one way or another translate into investments.
So these are some of the common features to all the countries.
These are common features.
India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal,
I would say
Bangladesh.
a bit less for Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is already almost at the other end of the demographic transition, is the aging country.
Closer to the Western demographic.
Because it started the demographic transition earlier. But
to some extent, even south of India, some states are closer to the Western societies in terms of demographic trends.
Because they started earlier.
Tamil Nadu, for instance, I know it because...
definitely. South of India, definitely. So that already is a big force. Another thing that, in terms of deep trend, plays well for South Asia is that you have been investing in education across all countries. One can discuss the quality of education, and it's true. But if you think of the labor force, the average education of the labor force will go roughly from 4 years now to 6 years by 2030. These 2 years of education, even again, if the education is not the best, people who are more educated manage to earn more. On average, whatever, 8-10% more every year of education. So you are having hundreds of millions of people. You're putting something more on top over the next 20 years. And then there is the force of urbanization. This is the region where urbanization is happening. Again, urbanization is not the same as in East Asia. In East Asia, you had more organized urbanization. Cities were built, people moved to cities. South Asia is messier. Cities emerge where you were living, it becomes a bit more urban than it was. It's not necessarily
half
that you went
rural,
to,
half urban kind of dwellings also
exactly.
emerge, yeah.
But you have a couple of 100 million people who will be moving to urban settings or urban settings moving to them. And the same people are more productive in urban settings. You manage to do more. You have more markets, more suppliers. So when you put it all together, you put fewer capitas that are not working per capita, more education, higher savings, higher productivity from urbanization, you will say, well, South Asia has something going for it. Whether that is a 6 or a 7% growth over a couple of decades, it's still very important. So that's the foundation. Then comes the current turbulent world we're in. And that's a world where we are going from very rapid growth and even faster growth of trade to slowing down, and trade now being at best equal to GDP growth. So
even lower than GDP growth.
In some points, at some points even lower.
At least the world trade is way lower than the world GDP growth of 2.5% in 2015, I guess.
Yeah, and it probably will stay that way for some time. I think a big change in there is the reorientation of China's development strategy. China has decided to go from being the factory of the world
so
to
how does China affect South Asia?
So in a way, I would say it affects, the negatives are much smaller than for other regions. Other countries are very much integrated with China. South Asia imports from China, but doesn't export too much to China.
But doesn't import also affect? I just wanted to sort of understand this. You have rightly said that China is not a huge export market for South Asian economies like India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, because they mostly export to the US, European Union.
Exactly.
But the massive overcapacity that China has created in commodities is really seriously impacting India. It's hurting India so badly that every other day we are raising tariffs, special duties.
It does, yeah.
And
so,
in India has imposed by some estimates the largest number of anti-dumping duties in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So
no, I agree. I'm not telling that it doesn't.
And since India is the biggest piece in the South Asia framework, as you said, so how does that
I'm not saying that it doesn't impact South Asia, but where it's impacting other places much more strongly.
Okay.
If I come from Latin America is a big exporter to China, and you see what is happening. Latin America is struggling, is suffering.
Yeah.
You get negative rates of growth in Brazil.
There's a recession in many Latin American countries.
Yeah. So in that respect,
so you're saying that since these South Asian economies are net importers of oil and other commodities.
Let me come to oil. Let me first stick to China. I think where you do have this negative impact is, yes, some things like steel and cement that can be extremely cheap at this point. But there is something positive about what is happening in China, is that labor costs are going up. And so some of the relatively low-end manufacturing, which you will want to tap if you think of the Make in India, if you think of the kind of industry that can absorb large numbers of relatively unskilled people. We're not talking about software. We are talking about these million people who reach working age every month and need to find something to do. That will become less competitive in China. It is still competitive because the logistics in China are phenomenal, the infrastructure is phenomenal, but labor costs are increasing very rapidly. So China is, what is happening in China is a mixed bless.
On demographics, that will give advantage to South Asia.
That will give advantage. If you think who could take advantage of it?
A skilled demographic skilled population.
Relatively not too skilled, like ideal for manufacturing.
Oh, okay.
This is ideal for manufacturing. So all the light appliances, I think there are areas where like auto parts, where I think there is a lot of potential for South Asia. So I would say China is affecting less than others hurting a bit when it comes to things like steel or tires, but playing to the favor of South Asia when it comes to labor cost and being competitive.
Okay.
And then you have the oil. And so the oil situation is one where no other region has gained as much as South Asia.
Because we are net importers of
net
oil.
importers. And one could say, well, it may come back. Oil prices may bounce back again. But even then, one has to be cautious because what has happened is a fundamental change in the structure of the oil market. In the past, the swing producer was Saudi Arabia.
Now it's shale oil.
And now it's shale oil. And the marginal cost of producing shale oil is between $45, $60. So as soon as prices go up, you have new suppliers coming in. So the expectation that oil will remain in a relatively low range for quite some time is not unrealistic. Of course,
so that's one of the biggest advantages.
It's one of the now
South Asia has.
It is already a bit behind us. The decline happened already. What I'm saying is it may not go up again, but it will not keep going down. Okay, so
tell me, so you study all the South Asian economies. You travel to all these economies. So this window of opportunity, which was provided by the dramatic fall in oil prices, and as you say, it's structurally it may not go back to $100, $110 per barrel because of obvious reasons, shale supplies coming up from in the US. So how should South Asia use this window of opportunity? And within South Asia, of course, since India has a huge weight, so India has to be a leader in exploiting this window of opportunity, right? So how do you do that? What's your prescription?
Let me start this time the other way around. Let me start from the short term to the longer term. I started on the growth on the deeper and then the transition. I think on the short term, how to make the most of cheap oil. I think it was a great opportunity to fix the distortions in the sector. If you think a lot of the transmission, how the prices are transmitted to consumers, different countries in South Asia have done different things. India did something very good. Basically, it introduced forms of carbon tax, which imply that not all the decline in oil prices, in energy prices,
we
was
passed on
to
about 30%.
consumer.
We didn't pass on 70%.
But it went much more
to fund
budget.
Public public investments.
Not everybody has done that. So I would say, if I look at South Asia, I would say
I think Pakistan passed it on almost entirely, right?
yes, and on others like Bangladesh, basically the state-owned enterprises that are related to oil are keeping the benefit and not passing all of it. So depending on the country, you find different solutions. I think India did something good, and it's something to continue. But that's something that fixes the sustainability, the financial sustainability of companies. You get from now on at low prices, automatic pass-through. You get out of the subsidy business, which has a lot of distortions. I think that was a very good move. I think.
Can I ask you one question here?
Sure.
This is a debate within India, which is some critics argue that instead of passing on just 30% of the oil price fall to the consumers, if the government had decided to pass on say 50% of say 50-60% and remaining 40% could have been used to reduce oil subsidies and to fund other public investment, that might have led to a pickup in consumption far more than is happening now, and therefore could have resulted in pickup in private investment also, much more than is happening now. Now, where do you stand on,
I will favor the longer term. I think I will not focus so much on the stimulus. With an economy growing close to 7%, you don't need so much of a stimulus. And if you can fix structural problems, and I think the right pricing of energy, the fact that you get the pass-through, but you can use the tax rate to model it. So I would say that's a good thing. Yeah, okay. That's a good thing. Then think about the second thing we were saying, labor cost in China. I would say, okay, how do you take advantage of that? How do you not just see the potential for manufacturing to come to South Asia, but really make it possible? How you go from the concept of making India to really making India? And I think that again opens an agenda. And then the third point I would say in terms of seizing the opportunities, again, I mentioned the cities in South Asia and the cities in East Asia. The kind of productivity you get in a city like Shanghai is phenomenal. You get it in some places in India. You get the Bangalores of India. You get different places. But many cities and cities along the Ganga River are still not very productive, excessively congested. So I would say if you think of these structural forces, the one that really, the demographics is with you, the savings will come naturally, education you have been investing, more can be done.
You have to increase productivity of these.
The productivity. And productivity is very much related to cities that attract good businesses, and that is where I would say there is a big agenda.
So you would say that this window of opportunity should be used to fix these problems?
Yeah. I think and the logistics, I was saying China is more competitive because even if it has high labor costs, it has good logistics. But what will it take to have ports, highways, the connectivity, the power, all the things that go together?
Tell me, Martin, do you find that, I agree with you, it's a problem, the way our cities are organized very unproductively. Do you find this common to other South Asian countries, or are some doing better than India?
No. I think, well, if you look at Sri Lanka, Colombo, and it happens also with cities in Kerala, the urban areas, they seem to be more functional overall. But if I look at Dhaka cannot be said to be a model city, and it's one of the very big ones. If I look at Karachi, which is one of the fastest growing cities in the world, and will be probably the biggest city in the world, having that to function really as a modern metropolis where ideas are exchanged, where production happens in no time. That is more demand. So I would say over the next 20 years, how to make possible the make in India, how to fix these distortions as we saw in energy, and how to get urbanization going right is what will keep you.
It's interesting you're saying this, because I have heard other economists also say that some cities in south of India, even Sri Lanka, as you said, Colombo, they have closer resemblance to East Asian cities in, say, Malaysia, etc., as they evolved, say, like they were 10 years ago. So they are closer to being more organized and productive cities than cities in the north of India.
Yeah, although there are very good examples in the north of India. We have been doing analytical work on where the cities are. And I would say, for instance, when you look at Delhi may not be as productive on average as Bangalore, but Delhi spreads its wealth so much. The catchment area of Delhi is so phenomenal that you have more or less rural areas that are having opportunities that they didn't have before. So to me, all of these makes the part where you have action is the urbanization.
For Delhi is a different example. I was referring more to what you were saying. Cities along the Ganges, UP.
They tend to be more congested, more dysfunctional.
Tell me, Martin, the big fall in oil prices which happened year and a half ago, of course it helps India, it helps the South Asian, other South Asian economies. Do you think inflation, because there's a lot of people in South Asia who are living below poverty line, so poverty is still a problem. So do you think the problem of inflation has been fully controlled in these economies, or it seemed to have been controlled until about a few months ago, but I find that in India food inflation is again kind of coming back, hardening a little. Consumer price.
It requires to keep an eye, but I think it requires to keep an eye. But I would say if there is prudent monetary policy, if the kind of fiscal consolidation we have been seeing across most of the region continues, I think I
believe Pakistan is also doing quite well on fiscal consolidation.
I think in general the region you see some effort to fiscal consolidation. Of course, it's helped by the circumstances.
It's because the oil prices.
Exactly.
And is Pakistan also doing it more because they're under some IMF program or something?
There is a strong commitment of the authorities. We are also involved. So yeah, the fiscal adjustment is a very important part of the path on which Pakistan is going.
So all this is for the good in terms of creating the right macroeconomic environment for growth in South Asia.
Although these are necessary conditions, they are not sufficient conditions. For instance, and let me point to two challenges that I will see for the region. One is when you have instability or insecurity, even if you have macroeconomic stability, if there is insecurity, it's difficult to have a lot of investment.
Political instability.
Political instability and security challenges.
Like Afghanistan.
Afghanistan for
And
sure.
recently what happened in Bangladesh?
It's what I was going to say.
Terrorist strikes in Bangladesh.
Bangladesh was, in a way, the country was best positioned to benefit from China's labor costs going up. But now a lot of people are nervous about Bangladesh because of the security situation.
A lot of textile exports had shifted to Bangladesh, right? From Bangladesh.
Yeah, Bangladesh has been, and Bangladesh has a homegrown entrepreneur group that is in textile. It's very strong. But you need to be linking to the global buyers who have to come. And so now there is nervousness.
There's nervousness.
So that's one challenge, I think, where more towards the western part of the region, but now also Bangladesh, is something that even if you do everything right, if that's not fixed, I think it will be a challenge. The other challenge is energy.
That's a political piece, yeah.
That's a political piece. The other challenge is energy. And I think in several of the countries in the region, energy is expensive, is unreliable. 30% of the population doesn't have access to electricity yet. The region will have to rely a lot on coal, which is very damaging. Not just is damaging for the world, but it's damaging for the lungs of people, for everybody in terms of health. So I would say the getting really strategic directions in energy will be extremely important.
Okay. Yeah. Tell me, this is another question that I wanted to ask you. If these countries, these economies were to sort of attempt some kind of common market, the first maybe 2 stages of what European Union did some decades ago. I'm not talking about us. The full-fledged economic integration. Do you think South Asia will get the necessary boost? Because today, the tax system in South Asia, indirect tax system, is in a mess, and India is being the largest economy, trying to correct it through its GST experiment. Now, do you think this GST experiment, transparent indirect taxation, could get extended to a larger South Asian region, and some new efficiencies could be explored?
Well, let me start by saying that GST approval is an extraordinary development. It's very positive news. And I think a strong India, given the weight of India, is very important for the entire region. So if GST adds efficiency, helps create even an integrated common market, that will benefit others. One way to think about the regional integration is that a lot happens with neighboring states. So if you're in Nepal, Bihar matters a lot to you. If you are in Bangladesh, West Bengal matters a lot to you, and so on and so forth. If these states in turn are better integrated to India...
And Pakistan and Punjab?
Pakistan and Punjab, yeah. So if these states are better integrated to the rest of India, even if your normal partner is just the state you have next to you, you gain from it. So I would say that's very...
That's a no-brainer, yeah.
That's a no-brainer. Now, what can be gained from greater regional integration? I think a lot can be gained. But I would say you referred to Europe and how Europe started. It didn't start on goods. It started on coal and steel. It started on one strategic sector. In fact, there were geopolitical reasons for that. There was the way to make sure that nobody will be building guns on any massive scale.
They fought so many wars in the previous century over steel or coal.
But I would say, let me go back to energy. Energy is the equivalent of coal and steel for South Asia, because you have a very natural complementarity. You have mountains and you have plains.
So energy could be an integrator.
Energy could be an integrator.
Common grid, etc.
And if you think of how much potential there is in Nepal, there is in Bhutan, there is in Pakistan, and snow melts when it's really hot in the plains. So you get a very natural complementarity. So you can reduce costs, and you can get a scale of generation. That is the only thing, my impression is the only thing that can really counter coal on a massive scale is hydro. It's really hydro.
So what was coal for European Union? It could be energy for South Asia,
Could be energy for South Asia. And it has one advantage. I think trade is very important. But trade is also a bit more complicated in a way, in the following sense. First, trade matters much more for the other countries than for India. If Nepal liberalizes, it doesn't make a big difference for India. If India liberalizes, it makes a big difference for Nepal. But second is there are always winners and losers.
Okay.
There are sectors that will resist, and so trade will be slower. Energy can be a win-win.
If it's done, everybody shares in the growing energy.
And today, India has enough surplus energy to make the first generous move, to use electricity diplomacy. For India to solve the energy crisis of Nepal is nothing.
Absolutely.
It's nothing. And so I would say, I will build on that analogy to say that there are other differences with the European Union. I think I will not say, oh, do like the European Union, because you have one thing that is very different, which is the relative size of India and the rest. When the European Union starts, France and Germany are more or less in balance.
But your point is taken that energy could be a glue.
Energy could be a glue.
So on that very interesting thought, we will end this discussion. Thank you very much, Mr. Martin Rama, for talking to us.
Thank you.
So it was very instructive. That's all we have in this edition of State of the Economy. We'll be back with you next week. Thanks for watching.